Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, and welcome to our new broadcast of Patriot Desk. This is going to be a 20-minute broadcast, and we're going to keep to that time every single time we're on the air, because we find that we have many more viewers who are willing to spend maybe 15, 20 minutes in front of a computer screen and get a lot out of it. So I also believe that when I'm giving speeches, 20 minutes is enough. After that, even I begin to fall asleep. But folks, two critical issues we're going to talk about tonight. One, would you believe that a court in Britain ordered the execution of a 2-year-old girl? And there's a story behind this that is shocking, but is an absolute fact. And you could look this up on the internet. I'll give you the information, and then you'll be able to see for yourself and read for yourself how this court ended up literally, folks, ordering the execution of a 2-year-old. Now, in addition to that, we're going to segue into the abortion issue. No one wants to talk about that these days. Roe versus Wade is going to be decided by the Supreme Court. When I mean that no one wants to talk about it, people are afraid to. What people, do you ask? Politicians. Politicians are afraid to take a stand, to publicly say that they are opposed to abortion. I am opposed to abortion. I am in favor of a right to life, based on a whole stack of evidence, if you will, even to the point, contrary, folks, to those who support abortion, contrary to their thoughts and their conclusions, that the founding fathers never addressed the issue. I've got to tell you, folks, they did address the issue, and I'm going to share that with you this evening. But let's get right to the first story about the United Kingdom. You know, apparently, the United Kingdom, the courts and their government, either they never got over the Revolutionary War, or they're still somehow in disbelief that people fled their country to come to America to do what? Primarily, to exercise religious freedom. And this is what this is all about, folks, this case. It's all about parental rights and religious freedom. So I'm going to get right to it, and I want to read the document I have. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just bits and pieces of it to give you an idea of a little bit of the historical background of this case. So here we have a judge at the United Kingdom's High Court ruled Friday that life support treatment for a serious ill 2-year-old Jewish girl can be withdrawn as it is in her best interest. Now, the parents of this child said that it is in the best interest of the child to live with them, and they'll take care of their very own child. In fact, the parents pleaded with the court based on their religious beliefs that they could not, because of their religious beliefs, allow or support or endorse the termination of their daughter's life. But the court didn't care, folks. They didn't care about the parents. They didn't care about their religious beliefs. They just went on and decided that this child's life has to be terminated. So a judge named Alistair McDonald said that the child had brain damage, no prospect of recovery, and ruled that it is in the best interest for the treatment that is currently sustaining her precious life now to be withdrawn. It is in the best interest for the treatment to be withdrawn. Who is the judge to decide your child should be terminated, that your child's life should end? The parents were willing to let the child live and do whatever they could, whether it be through prayer, whether it would be through medical treatments. They wanted to sustain the life of their child, folks. And I think they had every right to do that. But that's Britain, folks. I'm not familiar with their law. I understand that they do have laws that allow the government just to come in and do what this judge did. So a judge at the United Kingdom's High Court ruled Friday, all right, that because the child is seriously ill, that her life should be taken. So now her parents said that their Jewish faith cannot allow them to agree to the move, which would lead to her death, and wish instead to take her to an Israeli hospital for treatment. Think about this, folks. Apparently, they didn't have, I guess in the view of the parents, the right medical tools or equipment to sustain this child's life and to provide perhaps better treatment for her. So they wanted to take her to Israel, because in Israel, they had the treatment that the parents believed necessary to sustain her life and perhaps make some advancements that would eventually hopefully help her. Now, the parents' friends, their neighbors, their relatives, they implored the hospital to reconsider their position and allow them to take their daughter to a hospital in Israel which shares their religious beliefs and ethical framework. So here you have it, folks. Medical freedom in Britain, out the door. Parental rights, out the door. Religious freedom, out the door. And on and on and on. Out the door, resulting in the court ordering what I say is the execution of a 2-year-old child. So the courts rule that, listen to this, folks, that although the parents cannot be criticized for having reached a different decision informed by the religious laws that govern their way of life, but applying the secular legal principles, that, says the judge, he must. He cannot agree with their assessment, and he is required to act accordingly. Required to do what, folks? The judge says that he is required to order the execution, my words, the execution of this 2-year-old child. So the judge added that taking the child to Israel, if this wasn't that serious, this would be comical, because the judge says that taking the child to Israel would cause her discomfort and of no medical benefit. So now we have judges acting as doctors, doctors acting as judges, and out of the way, folks, put in the corner are the parents, the mother and the father, pleading with the courts not to terminate the life of their child. So it goes on to say that a lawyer representing the family said they were devastated, but they were considering an appeal to the ruling. So, folks, I suppose that case will be under appeal. I'm following up on it, but here's my point, folks. What we see happening in America today, we see happening the advancement of a socialist communist agenda. Now, Great Britain probably had these laws on the books for a long time. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with their laws, but I am familiar with our laws here in America. And I am familiar with what's happening to us as parents, what's happening to us with regard to our individual rights and our medical freedom. And yeah, folks, that's how far this can get. Right now, Americans from coast to coast are being forced, mandated to take a drug that they're unfamiliar with, that the CDC is unfamiliar with, that Dr. Fauci is unfamiliar with. Now, I say that based on the conflicting information that's coming out of the CDC, coming out of the White House, coming out from every nick and cranny and every so-called expert there is on the face of the earth regarding these unconstitutional mandates. Could somebody explain to me, anybody out there, explain to me, how is it that last week we read about a cruise ship packed with hundreds of people had to be left out at sea for a while because everyone on board tested positive for COVID? How is that happening after you find out they were all vaccinated? Every single last one of them were vaccinated. Then there's a U.S. Navy warship being deployed out to sea. They had to stop the deployment. Why? Because every single sailor on board got tested positive for COVID. How does that happen when every single sailor, every last one of them, folks, got vaccinated? How do you explain that hundreds, maybe thousands at this point, of people not only across America, but around the globe are seeing a surge in COVID and this other virus that's just surfaced, when most of them, from what I'm told, are vaccinated? So look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical expert, but I am an American citizen who believes in individual freedom and liberty. No one should be mandated to take a jab that they do not want to put in their body. No one should be threatened and bullied by the government because they did not take a jab. And then what happened last week, I mentioned this on One America News today. Well, I'll be on tonight, by the way, folks, Monday night, One America News on Natalie Harp's show, The Real Story. I mentioned that I was appalled, if you will, that New York City police officers were deployed to a fast food restaurant. At least it looked that way. It looked like a McDonald's or a Burger King, To do what? To remove children. To remove children who were sitting at a table eating their hamburgers and having a milkshake. Why? Because they did not have a vaccine passport in that eating establishment. Kids crying, parents are yelling, 4 or 5 cops are surrounding them. I've got to tell you, folks, 38 years in law enforcement, I've never seen anything like that. Now, I've got to be straight with you. I try hard to say I don't blame the cops, in a way I do, but they're caught between a rock and a hard place. I get it. But the police officer has to do all he or she could to be a friend to the public, to be a helpful friend to young kids, not to be a threat, not to be a bully. So when I saw the video, like I said, I was appalled. It looked like the New York City Tactical Squad descended upon this fast food restaurant to cut down a shooter or to cut down some sort of a violent criminal. Instead, they kind of surrounded this family and ordered them out of that eating establishment because they did not have a vaccine passport. So you got all this happening now, and now we got in Britain where a child is ordered to be executed by a court, a 2-year-old child, because according to the courts, she's too ill to cure, and yet the parents are begging anybody to help them. The Israeli government, I'm sure, agreed to take the child and to do what they could to treat the child, at least give the parents every avenue that they could take to exhaust in order to save the life of their child. But this is when government goes amok. This is when socialists, communists, and those who support that draconian ideology run amok. That, folks, is not freedom. That is dictatorship. Perhaps the British need to learn another lesson, but that will be up to their citizens. You would think in 1776 they got the message from we, the people of these United States. Apparently they didn't. Now, the issue of abortion. Boy, I've got to tell you, I've talked to many conservatives about this issue, a number of Republican colleagues and politicians of all stripes, and boy, do they dance around this issue. Look, you're either pro-life or you're not. It's as simple as that. And they'll use excuses. They'll use excuses like the scientists do and the medical professionals do and others do in courts. And I'm sure they'll use such arguments as to why people should be allowed to get an abortion and why people shouldn't. Now, I stand on the side of the arguments on why people should never, ever not get an abortion. And I stand on that side not based on medical science, not based on the arguments, whether it be legal or ethical, being brought before the justices in every court in the land, but I base my argument on something that can be summed up in 2 words. 2 words that no one wants to mention. 2 words that people will criticize. 2 words, folks. Common sense. Read the Declaration of Independence. Read the Constitution of the United States. So for those of you who are Democrats, socialists, communists watching, and for those of you who argue that my choice, my body, my choice, the Founding Fathers never had anything to say about this issue, you are wrong. It may be your body, but it is not your choice. That choice should be in the hands of who? The child in the womb. But obviously the child can't speak. The child has no voice. The child has no advocate. The advocate should be the government of the United States of America. Now, what do I base that on? I said common sense. Well, listen to this, folks. Just listen to this for a minute. The founders. Here are some of the words of the founders, folks, with regard to this issue. And then we'll go to another Declaration of Independence and see what is said on that parchment paper. So here we go, folks. First of all, what does the Declaration of Independence say? It simply says that we hold these truths, correct? Now think about this. Before I move on, the founders, all 56 signed it, right? All 56 of the founders signed the Declaration of Independence, which would lead you or me to believe, because we do have common sense, that they supported every single word written in that declaration, correct? There was not one dissenter. If there was, it wouldn't be 56 who signed it. It would probably be less than that. But the 56 debated it, they discussed it, and they said, we're going for it. So here's what they open up with, basically. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable, remember that word for a minute, inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I'm sure we're all familiar with that, right? Well, here's the kicker regarding the argument that the founders really didn't want to have anything to do with the right to life. Folks, it says, the words that they use, it says created equal. Created equal, not born equal, folks. If they use the word born equal, then we're talking about a baby, a child, a living human being out of the mother's womb. But they had enough wisdom to understand that they knew, based on their own common sense, after reading, whether it be religious documents, the Bible, or other types of rules, regulations, or laws regarding natural law. Of course, natural law in that day was the law of the land. That had to be God's law. And that was the guide that they had in creating the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. So they were smart enough. They had enough wisdom to put the word created equal instead of born equal. So, folks, I've got to ask you a question, and those who will argue with me to no end. Are you created after your mom gives you birth? Or are you created in the womb? Are you created in the womb? And by the way, who creates us? It certainly isn't man, so it has to be one other person. It has to be God. And so now the founding fathers understand this, correct? So I'm sure that they were very familiar with God's Declaration of Independence, right? That's his Bible, the Holy Word of God. So in Jeremiah 1:5, it says, before I formed you, that means before I created you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Think about this, folks. God talked about creation, forming in the womb, and then he talked about birth. He talked about one living being in the womb that was going to become born as it came out of its mother's womb. Creation and then birth. One person. And it was God who created that baby, not man. So our founding fathers signed the document after they no doubt debated, studied, and understood clearly the road they were going down with regard to this issue. Now, among the natural rights of man are these. You ready, folks? Listen to this. First, the right to life. And by the way, if you notice in the Declaration of Independence, the first right that is listed among the rights that the founding fathers wanted to secure for this nation is what? The right to life. Is that coincidental? Is that an accident? No. The right to life, number one on the minds of our founding fathers. So among the natural rights of man are these. First, the right to life. Second, to liberty. Third, to property. And together with the duty to support and defend them in the best manner they can. Guess who said that? Guess who said that? The first of rights of all rights is the right to life, and that the government has the duty, folks, to defend them the best manner they can. The founding father, Samuel Adams, said that. Samuel Adams, a founding father. How could anyone deny that any of the founding fathers did not address the issue of the right to life versus that of abortion? So now we go on with another founding father who goes on to say, in fact, it was James Wilson, all right, another signator of the Declaration, says that the life in the womb is protected from immediate destruction and every degree of violence and danger. The life in the womb. So that's a founding father, folks, who talks about a life in the womb. You don't call it a fetus. You don't call it anything but a life. A founding father. So here you have Sam Adams, all right? Here you got James Wilson. And then you got John Locke, who's an English philosopher. He goes on to say that all are equal and independent, and no one ought to harm another person's life, health, liberty, or possessions. Listen, this guy, John Locke, he made it a point to suggest that kings in his time, governments in our times, had no right whatsoever to terminate the life of a baby, to terminate anyone's life in the womb of the mother. So we could go on and on and on. Folks, I could give you a whole list here of the founding fathers, of people during the times of our days of Declaration of Independence. I go on and on and on, that the founding fathers knew back then that they had to do everything possible to protect life in the womb and out of the womb. But the big issue, at least with me, and I'm sure others is, especially somebody like me in political office, I have to, without any doubt, obey the laws of God, especially when it comes to the right to life. I have no right as a political leader to support any law, any executive order, any edict from any human being to terminate the life of a child. In Britain, I just shared with you, the court ordered the termination of a child who's 2-year-old, a 2-year-old child's life. Now in America, they've gone in some states, and New York's one of them, where you could get an abortion just about minutes before birth. I call that execution. I call that murder at the hands of the government. And so we must move on. We must address these issues. Women who have had abortions, don't anybody ever lead you to believe that you're a murderer or anything like that. You're not. You're not. I believe, and I've spoken to some women who have been involved in getting abortions, and many of them regret it, but they should not be condemned, these ladies. These women should not be condemned. You know, we all sin, the Bible says, and fall short the glory of God, but because of the blood of Christ, folks, because of the way he is forgiving, well, that's all we need to do. And he says, go and sin no more. So our country, the United States of America, if we are serious about getting healed, we need now more than ever to pray that the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, and that we as a people begin to educate young people about the ills of getting an abortion, the dangers of getting an abortion. Folks, my wife has reminded me many times when I address issues that many of these issues have to begin in the human heart. She's right. So we need to make sure that when we have these discussions with people, that we, in a very sensitive way, just share with them the beliefs of the founding fathers and to share with them what God Almighty said in his Declaration of Independence. That's it, folks. 20 minutes or so. I think about 2 minutes over. Now, if you would like to have, get this, folks, if you would like to have this document here, it's called The Founding Fathers and the Right to Life. It's yours for free. How can you get it? Go to our Patriot Desk website. All right. It's www.thepatriotdesk.com. And you'll go to the commentary section, and it's right there, all yours to read. In fact, when I have a lot of these printed up and we'll get an opportunity, we'll even mail them to you. So that's www.thepatriotdesk.com. Take you right to that website, and bingo, this entire argument about common sense and our founding fathers is there. That's it, folks. Thank you so much. How do you like that? I stuck to our time. So thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you next Monday night, 7 p.m. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers.